Thank you for being here. But ultimately, we started a company now around enterprise software to specifically address empowering open innovation to go much broader, faster, but with legal security at the same time. I also want to real quick introduce my colleagues. Just real quick, I want to thank Jen, who helped me put this gorilla theme to this. She did not only want me to wear this dark suit, she wanted me to run around in a gorilla outfit and try to scare you all. I nixed that idea. That was too disruptive, and it was not invented here. But I also have Randy Odom, a tall, silver-haired man, also not a silverback gorilla, but good guy, and Marcelo Lemos. Interestingly, from 20 years from the back end of innovation, Marcelo comes from PLM, lifecycle management, which, as we all know, will collide with open innovation software. And that's kind of another thing to keep in mind as we look at systems that enable more and more reach and filtration and ideation. So we'll talk about a business case and a solution set, not just a problem. So we know the gist here. The gist is that we have a whole lot of ideas coming into the enterprises in different ways, for different purposes with different type of outcomes. M&A, licensing, joint venturing, where you may want to explore an idea or a concept together. Of course, R&D, the big one, where we know historically we get a lot of our new products. Management expertise, consumers, employees, etc. So there's a lot of data coming into your enterprise right now, as you know, without new open innovation programs that it's difficult to manage. It has a lot of confidential matter, a lot of different ins and outs. And the other thing is it's coming from diverse communities, which is what we want, because we heard a lot the last 2 days about getting outside the box, that you don't employ all the best people. There are going to be a lot of inventors all around the world of all types, billions actually, and they could be in startups, they could be obviously employees, R&D, they could be external networks, etc. And you've got to have systems in place that can manage all this and structure all this and make sense of it. You can have a bunch of disparate systems managing these things, but that's also going to need to be cleaned up as we evolve into a new realm of open innovation. In terms of the goal of open innovation, I think we all agree, and it's been discussed an awful lot here very well, that we want to tap billions of minds, ultimately. Every great company, to be successful in OI, should be getting ideas from lots of places. And these communities are not just your employees and your R&D. It's your supply chain, of course. It's your customers, your consumers, and the rest of the world, which is probably the trickiest. And we know that if you can tap more and more communities, you can, of course, probably increase your diversity, probably have more disruptive ideas coming in, or ones that could rattle the boat a bit and shake things up. And so the goal is to extend your reach in open innovation. And as we work with companies, it's one of the first questions we say is, where are you reaching to go right now? Are you looking to just do internal ideation? You're looking to do supply chain? You're looking to go out to your customers? You may have 500,000 on Twitter or on Facebook. You're looking to go rest of the world, expert networks. Depending who you ask, the answer is almost always, we'd like to get the whole way, ideally. But that comes with lots of problems, as you can imagine. It's not easy. There's risk and complexity involved in doing that. But properly managed, the good news is it certainly can be achieved. So again, knowing ideally open innovation wants to have systems in place that can tap all communities for idea exchange, for ideation, and all that stuff. It really does beg the question, is there an 800-pound gorilla in the room? And if so, how do we manage this? How do we work with this thing? And that's why we've come up with these gorillas for you to take with you afterwards, because they can either be a little squishy ball that you put on your desk and you put your iPhone on it, or it's going to be a stress ball because this is driving you nuts and holding back your open innovation program. And just by a quick poll of hands, would you say that your legal groups and regulatory groups are, how many would say they're really looking for ways to allow you guys to extend your reach full aperture? How many of you would say they're behind you, they're helping drive it? And then we'll ask next where they may be neutral and where they may be a hindrance. But let's start with which of you believe in your companies they're helping drive it forward with everything they got? Very rare, and that's a normal answer. We're lucky there's at least one. How many think it's at least neutral? Okay. How many think it's a little bit of a hindrance or a lot of it? There you go. And so for us to go forward with open innovation, go ahead.
I don't think it's just legal, though.
Mm-hmm.
I feel it's also either leaders, managers,
Agreed.
workers, senior technical folks.
Agreed. Absolutely. And we'll talk about some of those issues. I won't recap the other cultural issues which have been discussed a lot at this meeting and other ones. I am going to center more on some of the legal and regulatory, but it will be ones that affect the culture and the mindset as well. So let me just highlight a few. Again, I'm not an attorney. We're not going to make this some legal dissertation or anything like that. I just want to highlight a few of the mindsets, and I'm going to channel, like a schizophrenic, some of my past legal guys that I grew up with that have affected my life and threatened me to 1 inch of my life if I violated certain disclosure rules and things like that as I developed new products. Because I've invented a lot, I've developed a lot, and so they were always on guard to make sure I didn't do it wrong and ruin things, as they put it. So, you know, we're going to talk about things like inventor rights, disclosure, CDAs, just real quick, and how they affect OI and how they can be mitigated. Ownership, patent law reform, just some highlights. We're not going to go deep here and bore you all with any of this legal stuff. But what I'd like to start off with is one of the bigger ones that may even have a cultural impact. The Reform Act of last year, that was enacted last year, with the patent law, of course, changed things pretty interestingly, at least in the States, in the United States. It basically just changed it from first to invent to first to file. And that may not seem like a big deal. Most of the world was doing that anyway, but it actually is kind of a big deal because if you're a guy in a garage, a small innovator or just someone, a consumer, you know, having to file and get an attorney perhaps is not easy. Of course, you don't want to file a junky provisional that hurts you later. It does sting a little bit. So, you know, what we're seeing is that this first to file created a bit of a race mentality, especially on the innovation side, universities, startups, entrepreneurs. It's not terrible, but it's there and it's brewing. Now they know, geez, I want to disclose to the big company. I want to work with them. I need them. They need me. But geez, you know, what's going on here? Did I get my patent provisional perfect? You know, have I done this right? And so there's just a little bit of paranoia. Now it'll go away. It'll ease out of the system, but it's there right now, and it needs to be addressed head on strategically. It can be solved. And the driving force is really beautiful here. If we just take one example of two types of communities that need to come together, no matter the paranoia. You know, on the left side, you could say universities, startups, you know, where I lived a lot of my life over there. Look, we can take things pretty far, but we typically need to partner. We need to raise funds. We need to find manufacturing, distribution. We're going to want to do licensing deals. We're going to want to talk to companies, period. You can't do it on your own. On the right side, of course, you got more and more of the buy side in this case, let's say. You got the companies and the big venture groups that need to look at ideas, lots of them. They're going to reject 95%, but they need to look at them, and they need to see them, and they need to scout. And they know that if they don't get enough in, it's going to be tough to grow their revenues and sustain that R&D pipeline of new products. But they don't want to sign 1 million NDAs. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So you've got some issues, but the parties want to come together. They do. So, you know, a couple other goals, conflicting goals, just to kind of highlight for sake of discussion. We'll touch on a few, like what we call digital permeability, because there's a new phenomenon now in terms of exposure and disclosure, which is driven by digital. We're connected differently now than we were 10, 20 years ago. And we'll look at things like unsolicited policy and things like that. But if we just center on what we call digital permeability, I liken it a little bit to Swiss cheese in that your corporate database is a lot like Swiss cheese. It's pretty easy to access right now. It's certainly a lot easier than it was 20 years ago. And you know, where an unsolicited policy was in place that says if someone sends you an idea, don't open that piece of mail, don't take the call, don't talk to them, you know, pretty containable. Now, you know, companies have gone open, they've gone social, they've got Facebook, Twitter, email, contact me pages, you name it. It's really easy to get stuff into your corporate database. Not that you should be paranoid, but there's people in your company that are. The same people that, of course, put up, you know, big McAfee-type IT security systems, making sure they don't lose IP from leaving their company, are also concerned that it doesn't come in to your company the wrong way either, and that they have some misappropriation issue downstream that could mess things up when things are looking good and you finally developed a great product. So we're a little more permeable digitally now, and that needs to be addressed. And I can tell you it's on the minds of your attorneys and regulators that have to create systems and policies to manage this as best they can. Another issue is, I would say, and hopefully you can see this on the right side, co-invention. Co-invention is a big deal in the world of open innovation because it's rarely discussed. You know, a lot of times it's more discussed like, let's get R&D closer to the consumer. Let's have that interaction happen more. Let's have them bounce ideas off. Let's share ideas. All good stuff. I do it every day. I want to do more of it. But on the legal side, if I could put my hat on with the legal guys, they're saying, sounds grand, but are you guys creating a disclosure risk? Is there going to be a eureka moment where you're talking either online or something and an idea's put out there and now there's an invention? They improved on ours. That's a big deal for them. They're not happy with that. You know, I've been in a lot of meetings, as I'm sure you have, where they said, whatever you do, Peter, don't go in there and invent. Do not invent. Have a meeting, discuss your business. Do not invent. We don't have the contract worked out. We don't have everything worked out. Even if there's a CDA, it may not manage co-invention. It may say, you've got to keep your part quiet, I got to keep my part quiet. It may not address co-invention. But the patent law doesn't care. If I met you for a day and you and I came up with an idea, the patent law says your name has to be on it, and so does mine. It does not care. And so the lawyers, of course, they know this. So they're kind of like, that's one of their bigger issues is, ooh, co-invention. Not collaboration, not connectivity, co-invention. And that's something to keep in mind. Again, addressable, but a big deal. And they see things differently. So they see crowdsourcing and community crosstalk as a potential means of building on ideas, and then even if the intent wasn't to invent, a eureka happens. A series of ideas are reviewed, and then someone goes, ooh, what if we did that? And it's a great idea, let's say. Patentable one, novel. You guys just, there's an issue. All right, who owns it? Is that now prior art? Was that a form of disclosure? Blah, blah, blah. Again, I'm not an attorney, but I can tell you this is their mindset. This is what they want to manage, if as best they can. So another key word, we all know this one, I think, is freedom to operate. You know, I think you can see the left side of the slides, but it says freedom to operate on the left. And what we mean here is that a company wants to talk, wants to share, wants to see as many ideas out there. But of course, they build up firewalls and certain management techniques to keep ideas from going into either R&D or other places so that there's never a downstream case that can be created that there was exposure to an idea that wasn't theirs, wasn't the company's. R&D was working on it at the same time, and of course, somebody came in and told you about it, or you signed a CDA that prevents complete freedom to operate for your company right now. It wants to go where it wants to go. It has a path, and it doesn't want anything, a CDA or any kind of mechanism in place to inhibit where it wants to go. And so we use CDAs, and we should be using them, as much as we can. But as you probably know, depending on which side of the fence you're on, they're not always welcome. I can tell you as a startup side, you know, sending a biz plan to a company or to a venture capital group and saying, hey, sign this first so we can talk, doesn't go over well. If so, you get a template CDA. You can't really change it. They don't like it redlined. It's not easy to negotiate it and make it balanced. And they don't want to sign too many because they're going to look at 1,000 ideas in this area. And they don't want to have anything that says for 3 years, I'm going to keep this quiet or use this or not do this. That inhibits their freedom to operate. It puts something in front of them that keeps the company from going wherever it wants to go. And so CDAs aren't a perfect answer. They're good and they will stay and we have to use them. But too many of them are not a great answer for anybody but the innovator. I had a million of them. They're good for the innovator. You can preserve your rights and all that good stuff. But they also can delay. In today's fast-paced connectivity collaboration world, they can delay that social connection. Like, for instance, if you have a portal or if you have a challenge post. I mean, challenges you can regulate a little better. But if you're disclosing or they want to have something unsolicited or you want to have an online conversation, if you need to stop everything and say, whoa, let's get a CDA, I mean, obviously it's going to derail from that moment in time. It's going to take a day, a week, a month, depending if you agree on the language of the CDA. So it's not good for today's fast-paced digital age with digital outreach and digital connectivity. And like I said, the redlining is always a fun topic. Let's talk a little about unsolicited policies. Let's just highlight that a little bit because that's an interesting one. Almost every company, no matter how open they are and how open they publish they are, usually somewhere in their legal verbiage somewhere is a pretty blatant unsolicited policy still. Not for everybody, but generally speaking. And it basically is required language, but it's a little bit difficult to enforce in this digital age because the courts are recognizing there's digital disclosure happening like crazy, and that you might even be eliciting it and asking people to share ideas. So the courts are sitting back saying, okay, fine, you posted a disclosure up that says it was non-confidential, it's all this, all that, but is that really what happened? The courts are saying, is that really what happened? And so these are under a little bit of scrutiny right now. In terms of open innovation. Nothing horrific yet, just something to watch. Things are changing because of digital connectivity. And I like to point out that unsolicited policies are a shame in some cases too, because if you have a formal policy, as many companies do, where they say, do not send me any unsolicited ideas. If I didn't specifically ask for it, do not send it to me. That's a bit of a shame, because as we heard today, we know the best ideas, potentially the best ideas, come from just some corner of the earth from, could be a kid, could be a consumer that just has a great idea, you never would have thought of it, and they wanted to send it to your company and tell you about it. I think you should take the idea. I don't think we should sit there and say, no, can't talk to you. It wasn't part of a challenge or a request. So, we have to look at this one a little closer. T's and C's, terms and conditions. Again, from a court's perspective, there's questions now. Are they unfair? Too complex? Too long? Too demanding? Are they misleading? And we know when we buy iTunes, right, we sign off a whole 13-page agreement, right? We just click it and we get our song. We can't redline that one either. Sounds great. Browser click agreements, boom, boom, boom. All there. We're covered, right? Nope, not really. If you look at some of the latest courts, they do work well, and they're pretty airtight for things like transactions and songs and things like that. In the world of crowd ideation, there's some courts challenging whether these even will protect the company. Because they're really saying, how was that elicited? Was it misleading? Could that person, especially if they're just a consumer, did they understand all those T's and C's? And the courts are going through this exercise now because now there's a new currency being traded, ideas. They could be worthless, and they could be worth billions. And they're tied to patent rights, and whose name's on the patent, and who will defend that patent, and prosecute that patent, and litigate that patent, and invalidate that patent. It's a big deal. So again, T's and C's, right now, and they're pretty liberally used, as you know, on the front of your portals. They're pretty tough. Right now, a lot of them say, if you want to give us an idea, we get to compete with you, we get to reject your idea, we get to keep your next born child. And I only say that because we're seeing that on idea portals with hardcore T's and C's, the true innovators are not clicking on those. The venture-backed companies, they know better. They're not going to sign that. The research organizations, the universities. Now, a mom, dad, consumer type person may click that like your iTunes and submit their idea and sign away whatever your terms and conditions say. But really high caliber innovators won't. And so we see a lot of firms saying, we've had a portal up, we announce what we're looking for, nobody comes in. Or we just get incremental ideas and stuff like that. And where's the high-tech stuff? Where's these great, grand innovators? Well, they know better. They're not going to sign that stuff. So a change is probably needed here a little bit to change that. OI brokers. I know they have two purposes, and we've been part of that movement where, one, they help you reach new communities, and that's awesome. Two, they are a form of a legal buffer that's being explored. It's unclear how much they insulate from this legal element, but certainly, if you look at the language, it comes close to almost asking for indemnity, or at least saying, hey, this other company's involved in helping us scout for ideas and filter them and go through them first, and then we'll look at it. And so, great move, I think, a good baby step in the right direction, but again, ultimately, not a long-term win, because having middlemen manage your most important currency is a risk. I mean, to outsource the review or selection of ideas, that's risky. I mean, are they going to really recognize a disruptive one, a complementary one? Do they know your business that well? Probably not. They're very costly, and they may not even protect you in the courts, but certainly they can help access networks. So they're a good step, but still probably not a home run. Then there's, of course, portals, of which it's hard to know around the earth how many companies have an open innovation portal or microsite on their portal, on their website. But probably the majority still don't, it seems. I know a lot of companies here do, and that's awesome, very, very awesome. It's much better to have one than not have one, by far, especially legally. And I'm putting my legal hat on for a moment there, because at least that sort of governs and structures kind of the intent of your company. Which is key. Legal, it's all about intent. And in this case, though, you got to watch out. First generation portals, many of which are glorified forms, you know, that can be tough because you have a lot of white space, free text entry. You got paper clips. People can attach what they want. A little bit risky. The lawyers don't typically like that, you can imagine, because they don't really know what's going to be attached or imported, and they don't want to have anything come in that shouldn't come in. So these need to be kind of evolved. So right now what we typically do is we put on pretty tough terms conditions so that if anybody does over-disclose, they've been made aware, and the T's and C's should protect us. But again, so where we are, how do we not go bananas with all this stuff? And we only highlighted a few of these legal issues that affect open innovation. But you know, the good news is it's solvable. If we can put up, you know, structured data that can, or structured processes, and digital software is great at this, that can stage disclosure, stage it. You can control your disclosure. No differently than an expert person like you would interview someone with an idea. You would do it carefully, and you would first get a lot of information before you get the secret sauce and the patentable matter, and then you would really qualify it and screen it first. So if you do that first, you're probably okay, and that will help in a lot of ways. The policies can be managed by communities. So you can have different communities for academia, different communities for venture-backed companies, B2B, different communities for employees that submit. And what's neat is you can create different communities that manage this differently. And we'll give you a few case in points where this was highly successful in changing the relationship with IP law and open innovation. So we'll talk about, you know, business case one, where we have, in this case, Kimberly-Clark Healthcare, you know, a pretty big medical device company, so dealing with a lot of IP and a lot of proprietary technologies, dealing with a lot of doctors and doctors with ideas, and nurses with ideas, and engineers and companies. So they really wanted to have these ideas come in, but they had an unsolicited policy that said we can't have unsolicited ideas come in. And what they did is they enacted a new type of software system that we configured for them, and now they dropped that policy where now they can actually have any idea come in, and the system provides a way to you know, structure the information, direct the person where to go, make sure the person doesn't go somewhere else, like just email something or send it in a different avenue. It makes sure that people come in the right way and have a single point of entry for all innovation-related discussions with Kimberly-Clark. That's really key. And believe it or not, in the court area, and I hate to keep going back to courts, if a company can demonstrate they've put up a big beacon that says this is the way in for talking with us, you're more defendable because you've really done a good job at telling the world how to communicate with you that's bilaterally secure. So these are good things. So what happens behind this portal is really what's interesting too, because we talked a lot about data mining and big data. So it's not just going to be a portal to capture an idea. It's actually going to include a comprehensive digital interview which structures the data to make sure that nothing confidential is imported. But more importantly, it automatically gives you tons of due diligence and insights into that idea, so that even beyond probably what could be beyond the submitter's knowledge in terms of what they know about their own idea. This thing can help calculate regulatory elements, manufacturing burdens, stage of design, issues with product development, commercialization, competition. And this report is generated within seconds of that party submitting to you, and it goes to the OI practitioners. They decide if they kind of like the general look and feel of this idea, and then they kick it into an interactive, collaborative rating review crowd commentary module where you can share it with your peers around the world, get them to comment, rate, due diligence, and there's the usual stuff that happens there, and then it kicks into another repository where you can have further data mining and advanced search and comparisons. All this right under the little button on the website. And that's key because, going back to the legal stuff, this thing structures that every digital piece of data beautifully. With the previous speaker talked about big data and all the digital terabytes. This thing is going to capture it all and index every word that's said and calculated so that you have it all there for data mining, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a way to make the legal guys happy and the regulatory people happy, but more importantly to make you happy, where you get the data and the analytics and the quick filtration and scoring. An example of the kind of horsepower you get on the report side would be here. Here's on the medical side, a computer-generated, so machine intelligence, created output report, and this is just one of probably 20 pages, that has calculated, based on the Q&A with the external party, all sorts of key things that you can look at very quickly to see if this is a fit for your company, by key areas like you see here. Perhaps the risk profile is too high, or you like this one or you don't, where it is in maturity, and then it calculates a lot of other areas from design, manufacturing, competition, et cetera, et cetera. And this saves a lot of time and a lot of money, and also structures the data so that there's no over-disclosure. And then that report goes to, of course, the entire team, and it's non-confidential, and nobody signed a CDA. So this disclosure happened within nanoseconds online. Neither party had to sign a CDA and fight over that, jeopardize their freedom to operate. They had safe disclosure to your company, nobody gets hurt, and you get a ton of data. So no surprise that this new generation of portal that's software powered is now made its way into CPG and food and beverage. Here we have another case study with Campbell Soup Corporation. And they also wanted to have an unsolicited portal, but they wanted to have a single point of entry for everything. We've heard a lot the last few days where you have 5 or 6 different OI systems, and they're all over here, and some of the parties are kind of getting sick of all those disparate systems. They'd like to put them under one roof, one application, have all ideas looked at, no matter where they come from, whether they come from R&D or an academic site, it doesn't matter. They want them all coming in so they can be looked at holistically by the entire corporation. And so they were interested in having a single point of entry to govern all communities. Employees sign in here, and obviously academia, moms and dads, et cetera, consumers, all within one portal, and then all the rest of the software happens, and they have all this horsepower and protection on one application. So again, lots of other features. They also get to have promotion of things where they can foster engagement. Especially on the employee side, there tends to be burnout or fatigue. They want to have a rich site that's mobile, where all their employees can use it. Their plant workers, everybody. You don't have to have a PC. So they really want to make sure there was a higher engagement by internals. And then also, of course, a rich community that was personalized for the external members, like researchers or academia or venture-backed companies. They need a different greeting and a different welcome mat than perhaps a consumer. And so the portal is, of course, personalized more to address that. They post their challenges, of course, so they can really solicit ideas, not just manage unsolicited. They can even customize where they push each challenge. And there's no middleman here. I mean, this is them. This is doing it through their portal that they own, that they promote, that is search engine optimized, pushed out to the world, found by experts all around the world, and then submitted to a single point of entry. Again, with complete legal protection and structured data for data mining. Then the system goes on, of course, with that crowd commentary, even co-invention capability, where you can have your peers assigned a role and say, hey, we got this idea from the outside, what do you think? People can add to it, co-invent, attach documents, et cetera, and really have an online conversation about, is this a fit? And mainly, again, this is different community management tools, so this won't jeopardize any of the IP laws or legal compliance measures, because where this capability is controlled by community. So that you wouldn't want to give this type of capability to the public necessarily, because then they would co-invent potentially and you'd have issues. But you can extend some of this to everybody. So, all right, enough about all that legal weird stuff, scary stuff. It's there, it's addressable, it won't go away. The further you reach and the more high IP stuff you want, the more you're going to have to address it. But the good news is, you know, we can definitely coexist. We can make this work. It doesn't have to be a problem. And we know it's not going to slow inventors. They're going to keep inventing no matter the legal complexities. We know corporations want to and are embracing all types of OI capabilities, and that should continue. There's no doubt. Ideas are everywhere, so that's the key here, legally. If they're everywhere, how do you mine them? How do you create that conversation? How do you do it safely? But you need to do it. Earlier collaboration is the goal. I mean, if you have to wait for a CDA to be in place and wait for all these contracts to be in place, it's taken too long nowadays. You've got to foster an immediate handshake online, wherever, make stuff happen, make a relationship, get to business quickly. No one has time anymore to wait weeks and to do this and do that. Someone else will move on an idea much faster. But the good news is there's next generation technology that can do all this, that can help you manage the communities and those specific interactions, extend your reach, and manage the legal 800-pound gorilla as well. So just to kind of conclude, you know, new best practices will allow you to accept a lot of matter and a lot of content, but avoid confidential or patentable information prematurely. You'll have risk protection, which is really key, so you can really turn your legal folks and regulatory folks into your allies, so that hopefully next time your hands are up saying, yep, they're behind us. They actually see portals and software as our answer to remedy OI, legal concerns, not hinder them. There's actually a way to solve it because you have digital structuring capability, and you can generate business intelligence securely. And if you do it right, you can have a first mover advantage because you can get to that idea faster than your competition can, and that person with the idea can find you. 4 billion connected people, they can find you much quicker. You only have scouts in so many continents. This digital way of scouting is the way to go. Certainly, it should be a complement to what you're doing now. And in avoiding premature, what I call premature NDAs is key. You will need one. You got to put it in place when things heat up and you think that idea is a fit for you. But it shouldn't happen right at the beginning. That's going to cause a lot of problems. You should look to see if the idea is a fit for your company first, strategically, then move into an NDA that's more tailored and hopefully around less ideas than all of them. And so, but you got to prove to the outsiders that you have a trustworthy portal. Okay, if they see T's and C's that are nasty and long, and to them, to their eyes, I'll tell you, threatening, are they going to click on you? They're not going to. And so what you got to do is you got to have less punitive T's and C's at the welcome mat. And with this new structuring and community management tools, you can. You don't have to put up one T's and C's that scare away quality, smart innovators and companies. So the new portals can foster trust and bilaterally protect both parties so that there's no disincentive to come in and tell you their idea. So what we're trying to say here, where does 800-pound gorilla sit? As you know, wherever it wants to. Legal is a big deal. And we know that they've kind of been holding us up a bit. So the takeaway message is they don't have to. I would just go sit with them, show them the new solutions here, and they will help you unleash open innovation. They will actually be pretty darn energized about this new method and process. And they'll actually get behind you and say, it's time to go big, it's time to go really open, not just supply chain or employees, really open, and race for those new ideas that could transform our company. So that concludes the formal part of the presentation. I did want to see if you had any specific questions, or you actually run this part. Yeah.
Sorry. So a quick round of applause, though, for Peter. It's a great job.
Thank you.
So one point I want to make out of the gate.